Okay, so just a reminder, just a couple housekeeping things, and then we'll get going. This is a public meeting, so this is being recorded, and because of that, we have disabled the chat. Okay, so and the reason why is because when you put stuff in the chat, we then have to put it into public record. So it's just easier if you just unmute and speak, so then it is on public record. And then there will be time at the end for public comment, should there be any members of the public that would like to use that time. So today's meeting is kind of like a pre-meeting to the meeting on the 24th. And so it's a little bit of level setting, right? And so I know some of you have been on grant advisory committees, some of you have not. And so it's just to go over roles, expectations of you all, staff, and then to get a little bit of feedback in terms of what you all need from staff, okay, on the 24th. So that's kind of why we're here today. So it's just a bit of an informal conversation. I do have a couple of things that I do need to cover. But otherwise, I'm really just kind of looking for feedback from you all about what you feel like you're going to need to see on the 24th. Okay. So as we go through this, feel free to raise your hand, unmute, speak, all of those things. Okay, we'll get started. I like to just kind of start with this. Also, I have a cough, so I apologize if I'm going to try to keep it at a minimum, but I apologize if I'm coughing through this presentation. I like to start with this slide because I think a lot of times people, they know us, they've worked with us, but don't really know exactly what we do or who we are. And so a couple of things. We are the Criminal Justice Commission, CJC, and then we have a 7-member body that is known as the Commission. Okay, so as staff, we try to differentiate between the two by saying CJC staff and the commission. That is usually what we're referring to when we talk about the commission, is that 7-member body. And then we do research, and we do participate in policy groups, and we do grants. And so we have a research side and a program side. I am part of the program side, and our job is to get grants stood up and get money out the door. Okay. And so that's what we're staff and the commission, that's our purpose. So then I just kind of wanted to quickly go over a timeline for this grant. The grant solicitation was released on the 3rd. It is due on the 13th. Just a reminder, that is a Sunday. So they do have that weekend to get everything in. It's due, I believe, at midnight or 11:59. And so they have that entire day. I did have a webinar. I held a webinar last Friday, going over the process of SM Apply, and how to submit and how to go through that data, that kind of grant database. And would it be helpful for you all to see that slide deck or to see anything? It literally is just kind of to how you go through SM Apply and how you submit the application. I know Orion was there. I don't know if you found that helpful at all, Orion. Is that something that would you all feel like you'd benefit from seeing that slide deck? I'm going to send it out today, and I can include all of you if you'd like.
Yeah, I think that'd be great too.
Okay. Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, and if you all have any questions or if there's anything beyond that, there will also be included a link so you can actually watch the presentation as well. So if there's any questions there, that will be available. So grant application is due on the 13th. We then will meet again on the 24th, which is the following week. I believe that's a Thursday. It is currently scheduled as a 6-hour meeting. I don't know how long the meeting is going to take. So we'll try to get through during that time. One of the reasons why we don't know how long it's going to take is because we don't really know how many applicants how many applications we're actually going to get at this time. And so I think I looked Friday at the number of applications that had been started, and it was like 1 or 2. So I'm assuming we're going to get more than that, but I'm not sure. So, and then the commission will make the final award decision sometime in November. We don't have that commission meeting scheduled yet. We're trying to figure out how that's going to work around the holiday. So, Orion.
Rachel, is the 24th, is that also a public meeting?
Yes, that will be a
Okay.
public meeting. Yep, absolutely.
And
And
then-
in that meeting will actually require quorum as well. So we'll have to make sure that we do have a I think for this it's 7, I believe, is quorum. I'll have to double check on that, 6 or 7. So we will need quorum on that so you all can make recommendations. So
Okay.
we'll
And
we'll be following up.
It'll be a virtual meeting or in
Yes.
person? Okay.
Virtual meeting. Yep. Any questions about this? Okay.
Rachel, I've got a question about it wasn't on the timeline, but if the award decisions are in November, are the funds expected to go out in December, or when would the funds be expected to go out to jails?
Yeah, so there is a protest period that we do have to wait for. So there's it's a 14-day protest period. The reason why I didn't put it on there is because we don't have a date yet for the commission meeting, and so that kicks off the 14-day protest period. And then we are able to get contracts out. And so if by chance we can't get a commission meeting at the end of November, it's going to be pushed until the beginning of December, if that makes sense. And then it's going to kind of push everything. So I didn't put that just simply because I didn't want to commit. What I can say is we're hoping that it's December, like early December, is when those will go out and we can then get money out. But we do have that 14-day period that we have to account for any protests that come through. So kind of a non-answer, and I apologize. But we're still trying to get those end of year meetings scheduled, which are always difficult because of the holidays. So, okay.
Sorry, one more question.
Nope,
Will
that's
we
okay.
get, since it will be a virtual meeting, to go through those, will we get the applications at that time or
No,
before the meeting?
we'll go over that whole process in just a sec on how you're gonna
Okay.
get everything and how it's gonna come to you. Also, my dog's barking. I apologize if you can hear him. No, yeah, we'll go over that whole process and get any feedback from you all in terms of what you think you're gonna need. So, absolutely. Okay, real quickly, just going over different kind of roles that we have here. So staff, we review the application for completeness. And what we mean by that is making sure that every part within SM Apply is complete, that there's not anything missing that's required. We will reach out to grantees or applicants if there is something that we need from them that we're not quite sure what they meant or something messed up in SM Apply. We will be reaching out that first week to kind of get information if we do need it. We will analyze and review application requirements. So we are going to go over that in a little bit. And that's probably the part where I'm going to need the most feedback from you all in terms of what you need to see. And then also we do have unallowable funding requests that are outlined in our grant administration guidance. So we go through that. Anything that isn't unallowable, we will then disqualify from their request. Okay. For you all, you're going to discuss the applications as a group, come to some decisions as a group, providing constructive feedback to applicants. So we're gonna kind of get to what I mean about that a little bit later as well. And then the main thing and why we need quorum is you'll then provide funding recommendations to the commission. And then the commission will then consider those recommendations, and then they are the body that then makes those final decisions. Okay, so this is kind of how everything is broken up. We'll go over this in a little bit more detail as we kind of go through this. Any questions on this slide in terms of roles and why you all are here today? Okay. Oh, Moxie.
Yes, thanks. I'm just wondering, when we give feedback, are they going to revise their applications, or are they just going to keep it in mind in case they get the grant? Thanks.
Yeah, so we'll get into that, and the reason why this is a little bit of a unique process is because this is a formula grant. And so when we get into the application requirements, it's in a couple of slides. That's when we'll talk about that feedback specifically and what that looks like for the grantees. So also it will kind of drive the presentation and the information that I give you all that day. So, okay, this is just a slide that we share across every grant program and every presentation, going through conflicts. I know some of you have reached out and asked questions regarding conflicts of interest. Essentially, you all are public officials, considered public officials when you are part of this grant advisory committee. And so when you participate in this, essentially, if there's anything where, or any decision where there could be, could result in a financial benefit or loss to you all as public officials, that's considered a conflict of interest. Okay. And so we just ask that if you are in this position, I know some of you have reached out and said, you know, we might apply, you know, as an entity, we might be applying. Is that a conflict of interest? More than likely, yes. And so we just ask that you just reach out and let us know that particular application is a conflict of interest. If you have questions, please reach out to me, you know, outside of this, and we can walk through it. And essentially what that means is when that application comes up, you just mute yourself. If you'd like, you can go off camera. You don't have to leave the meeting, but just don't participate in any of the conversation or any of the vote regarding that particular application. Okay, does anybody have any questions on this particular slide? Okay, reach out to me if you do have questions. Also, please reach out to me if you do feel like you have a conflict, and we'll just note it when that application comes through, and then we will remind you during the presentation just to mute and not to participate. Okay, so some of the things that we use when we go through kind of this application process is the administrative rules. Most of you were around when these OARs were developed. We are going to get into a few of them and what they mean in terms of the analysis of each application and what that looks like. The grant administration guide, it's essentially where we house all of our policies and procedures for every grant, kind of across the board. When I sent out the solicitation as an attachment, the grant administration guide was also attached. So everybody that is applying should have access to that. It's also on our website. If you all can't find it or you'd like a copy of it, just please reach out to me and I can provide it to you all. Essentially, the thing that we use as staff that is the most helpful, or the list of unallowables that we have in there that we use to then disqualify any sort of funding requests that fall in those categories. So, and then also the solicitation. Try to provide as much detail on the solicitation as we need to for grantees or applicants so that they have the information that they need. This one is unique, which we'll cover in just a second, particularly where funding can go. And so that was also included in the solicitation. So this is what we use, staff uses across the board as kind of a way to take these applications and analyze them and then present you all with the information that you need to make these recommendations. This, I think you've seen this slide probably 100 times if you've been in any of these meetings. Again, it's just a setup. This is why we are here today. Eligible applicants are cities and counties that operate a local correctional facility. We did do tribal consultation for any tribal correctional facilities, and there's none that are operating at this time. And so all of these funds that were available went to the cities and counties that operate a local correctional facility. I also want to note, because sometimes I do get questions, applicants can submit an individual one, or they can submit an application in like a joint application in partnership with other correctional facilities. Okay, so those, I touched base a little bit on that in the webinar, but if anybody has, if you all are in contact with any potential applicants that has questions like that, please encourage them to reach out to me. But that is something that is an option should correctional facilities choose to do that. Okay. So availability and duration of funding. So there's a total of 10 million available in grant funds. We presented a funding table to the commission based on a formula that was developed. It was approved by them last commission meeting. And so the funding table was made available to all of potential applicants. And so they have that funding table. It is also on our website under the JMOUD tab. And so if anybody's looking for it, that's where it's at. And then for right now, currently as it stands, this grant is the project period is just a one-time solicitation. It begins October 1st, 2024, and then it ends September 30th, 2025. So that is the length of time that this money can be used, that essentially applicants or grantees will have the ability to spend the money that they receive. Okay. Any questions on this? Dan?
Since it begins October 1, does that mean if funds went out in December, jails could backspend basically
Yes.
to October 1? Okay.
Yep. Yeah. In their financial reporting, they can, which when they get their actual funds, we'll go through that process. They'll just indicate that they're going back to October 1st. But yeah, absolutely.
Take her to school.
Moxie?
If some of the funding is not spent by that end date, then what would happen to that funding? Would it go back into some future specific budget, or does it go back into the general fund? Thanks.
Yeah, so as it currently stands, the way that this is that it would come back to us. So they would have to give the money back. I don't know that is going to change as this kind of progresses, especially with some of the changes with the potential upcoming legislative session and things like that. But as it stands right now, they do only have that time period to spend funds, and any unspent funds will then come back. That there is potential that could change, but that is kind of where it's at right now, which is why when talking to applicants or grantees, that we are stressing that it is that time frame to spend funds. So, Captain Eby.
Well, you kind of answered my question, because what if, if there's a grantee is asking for a period of time, because obviously that's a very short period of time to set up a full program, wanting to, and outlines it over a couple of years to spend, so we're saying September 30th, 2025, you have to spend it all.
At this amount of money, yes, as it currently stands. I will say that CJC has put in our governor's budget, kind of our budget going forward in the new biennium. We have put in a request for more continued funds for this. And so that is something that we are seeking funds for, is to continue this grant program. We just don't know right now, right? And so as of right now, we are treating this as a one-time solicitation. Kind of back to Moxie's question, that could potentially change as we go through the legislative session, go into the new biennium. And as we kind of get a better idea of what's going to be happening, we will be communicating to the grantees at that time. But currently, yes.
Let me turn that just a little bit. So spend the money. Let's say grantee decides to, in the proposal, partners with an outside provider, and obviously they do a contract and they spend the money, but the contract itself actually lasts over a couple of years, but they paid for, say, medications, for instance, to get that done. Would that qualify, or would that not be allowable under the duration of the funding?
The contract is fine. The length of the contract we don't care about. It's
as
the
long
use
as it's
of
spent.
Yes, it's the
Okay.
use of CJC funds. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Orion?
Is there any penalty if they are not able to obligate or spend down the funds, other than just having to give them back?
No. This is not a competitive grant. And as it stands right now, it's a one-time solicitation. So no. Again, this, I'm trying to just kind of speak as like, here's where we currently are, here's where we currently could end up. That could change, right? And so I don't know, there is potential that this grant could look very different at this time next year, right? And so as we currently are, we've kind of set these these guardrails of this is where we are. There's an expectation that you continue to spend, but we also know, we're going into a legislative session, we're going into a new biennium. Things potentially could change, but as of right now, no, there is not any sort of issue if they don't spend, other than we would like them to spend because we've given them money. So
No, I think they all would too, but just if it wasn't able to happen in such a short timeline, there's not any additional penalty to the facility.
Yeah.
That's all. Okay.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions on this timeline or anything else? Okay. I don't know how many of you have seen this. This is a crowded slide. I do recognize that very much so. We kind of wanted to get it all in one slide so you could see, but this is the funding table. There is, like I said, this is available on the website in a much better, it's in like an actual PDF if you'd like to see it that way as well. But this is where we ended up with the formula. This is the table that the commission approved. And in this particular grant, with the way that the OARs were written and approved with unallocated funds, if out of this group there are some that don't apply, we are not going to recalculate the formula and give people more money at that time. So on the front end, we're not going to recalculate and then change these numbers. We're going to take those unallocated funds and do a supplemental later. Okay. And what that allows for is a couple of things. We have a really, really tight timeline with this. And so we don't want to have to send it back to get them to recalculate to then get it approved by the commission again. So it adds an extra step in there for the applicants, and it delays getting funds out because we are trying to get them out so quickly. And so there is that. And then also we want the opportunity, if there is, in 6 months from now, there is a need that other, that facilities may encounter where they do need new funds. We potentially could have a pot of money of those unallocated funds that we could then give out at that time. So any questions on this? This is kind of a different way that we've done this in the past with formulas with the unallocated funds. So I just want to make sure that's kind of clear. If you've worked on any of our other grants, it's a bit different. Moxie.
Yeah, I just was curious about NORCOR, and I looked it up, and it looks like it's a grouping of correctional facilities for 4 counties. So they're just not duplicated here in the table, right?
Right, that's correct. Yeah, they were just one group. So any other questions on this or unallocated funds? Okay. Okay, so this is where we kind of get into the space. Oh, no, go ahead.
Can I have one question on the unallocated funds? If a group is struggling to try and put something together and get it in, and so they don't, and their funds are kind of back in that pot, when the supplement comes out, is it just going to be available to people that actually applied, or could people do it if they weren't able to get it done in this timeline?
That's a great question. I'm trying to think if we. So I don't know. That's a great question. Yeah. So in the past with other grants that we have done, where we've had leftover money, we have offered that option of where we have a pot of money. So like for like our marijuana, we've done new grantees and then done currents. We've allowed them to kind of continue, and then if there's any money left over, we've allowed new grantees or new applicants to come in. So that is a potential option there. As it currently is, we don't have that, but that's something I guess we could look at depending on how much money we have left over, right? So if there's a huge amount, in the unallocated funds, potentially we could do that. I don't know. That's a good question, but it's something that we can absolutely consider. So the other issue too, Orion, is that it would be a very short timeline for them to spend, right? So they would have to consider that as well. So if we did it 6 months from October, we did a supplemental fund, theoretically they'd have 6 months to spend. So there is that to consider as well. So it's something that we can absolutely look into. But as of right now, I don't know. So sorry.
Oh, that's perfectly fine. Thank you.
Yep. Brett Marsh, did you have a comment or a question?
I do have just a quick question. I'm just checking in to see how this is all going. It sounds like it's going great, but I'm wondering if you, as this grant process goes on and the group identifies things that needed to be changed in the program, potentially in the underlying statute, if you have a policy bill that's going to be reserved for that purpose, or whether it would be helpful to have a bill in waiting just to make any changes to the program.
Are you talking about the actual bill itself, or are you talking about the grant process? Okay.
Well, I'm talking about the statute.
The statute.
Defined all this in pretty broad, like the deadlines or whatever.
Yeah. Can I get back to you on that? I think so. I think that would be helpful, but I don't know. I don't want to speak for Ken, our executive director, in terms of what they want to do with what their direction is for this. But yeah, it's something that we should consider. I do know that this is a program where we don't actually know what this is going to look like, because we've never done something like this before. And so like not knowing how many applicants we're going to get, not knowing exactly what they're going to be asking for, the bill kind of, which we're going to get to, the bill kind of directs them in terms of where funding can go. So maybe that is something where we can figure out whether or not that's going to work, or whether or not that is a place that could potentially be adjusted. I think we will know more in terms of what needs to be fixed potentially after we get these applications back and we kind of figure out what works and didn't work. So we can absolutely get back and kind of circle back to this conversation, because I think it's really important. We also had this conversation with the formula itself, and whether or not going forward, we're going to have to kind of adjust how we did this formula based on who applies and what they need and what they get access to. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that we can consider.
Yeah, and I just want to note, we'll be standing by so that if as lessons are learned, there are things that we need to change in the bill around what can be funded, the flow of funding, whatever, we want to make this work. So we'll do whatever.
Okay, absolutely. I appreciate that. Yeah. And we'll definitely be circling back, because this is a learning experience for us as well in terms of how this is going to work. So, Orion.
It was just kind of a thought following Representative Marsh's there that might be a good idea too, because there's still a lot of moving parts with the Medicaid waiver, and I know this is really trying to be an impetus to build up capacity for hopeful long-term funding. So sure, we should probably talk once we have like at least the MOUD portions of that readiness assessment are completed. I'll check with our Medicaid offices if that's something that we can share too.
Okay.
So we're surveying all the jails right now on what they're currently able to do in advance for the waiver.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think that would be incredibly helpful to have continued conversations on what this looks like in the future. So absolutely. Okay. So now, excuse me. Now we get to the part where I would like, there's two slides here that I would like to go over and get feedback on, and then kind of what you all want to see and how you want to see it after this. But these are in the OARs, and this analysis part will be captured in questions in the narrative, in the application itself. And so These particular OARs were not provided in the solicitation for that reason, because they're then captured in the narrative. So we need them to be able to demonstrate a couple of things. And so staff analysis on our end will then be looking at these for complete answers. We'll be looking at whether or not they met this criteria and whether or not they answered these in a way that makes sense, right? One of the things that I stressed on Friday in the webinar was, please provide clarity, be succinct, make it so that we don't have to infer or make any sort of assumptions when you're answering. And so this is kind of that space where they need to do that, and they need to provide answers that are very clear. One of the things, this is kind of going back to Moxie's questions about feedback and the roles. So this is a formula grant, okay? And so this is not a competitive grant. And so this analysis looks a little bit different. And what it means is, as long as they meet these particular criteria, then they will get funds, okay? And so one of the things that we kind of have to, as a group on the 24th, pay attention to is, if they meet the criteria, that is kind of the analysis, right? Because this is a one-time solicitation and there are some guardrails in OAR, but this isn't an established program that has been running. How well they're doing it and how well this is going to, how well their program is going to progress isn't really a question that we get to analyze as a group, okay? And so that's where that feedback can come in, all right? And so does that make, am I clear on that, kind of that difference between, so it's not asking them to correct based on feedback, but it's providing feedback in their answers, or providing feedback on the structure of their program, how their program is going to operate, so that they can kind of carry that throughout the implementation or the process of their program. And then if this goes through another grant program, we can then use that feedback as part of the analysis the next time. Does that make sense? It's a little bit different if you've ever worked with a competitive grant. This is a little bit of a different process. We are just looking to see whether or not they meet this criteria. I'm just going to pause and Grant.
Yeah, I'm struggling to find this OAR right now, and I really kind of want to dig through it a little bit.
Are you talking about the one? Oh, let's see. Oh, here, I have it here, right here. There we go. Yeah, so this is the next part of that. This is what they can then ask funds for. They can request funds for this stuff right here. Okay. So this is the second part of that analysis. And so this will also be something that staff will go through. Again, we're going to disqualify any unallowables. We will then present this. I did get a couple questions from potential applicants on Friday about some things that may not quite fit in this as worded, some requests, and they're going to have the opportunity in their budget projection plan they have a narrative section, and I just made it very clear. Use that narrative section to then link what you're requesting to something on this list. And so that will be something as well that I will be presenting to you all as a potential decision as to whether or not, excuse me, it meets these requirements. So, Daniel.
Yeah, I guess I was going to ask about that too, Rachel, about, so I heard from some of the jail commanders asking about electronic health records, and that's certainly an operational barrier. It's not unique to MOUD or MAT program operations, but it's certainly a barrier. And wondering, I guess, is this grant commit, like, are we able to come into the meeting looking at individual applications already knowing what we think about maybe kind of borderline topics like an EHR? I don't think it was originally kind of conceived of when we were in work group to make the legislation here. But I'm curious kind of what the best approach is, because it might be harder to like debate it once we see applications from individual jails.
Yeah, so great question. That actually came up on Friday. That's what I was referring to. So they just need to be able to use language in their request that links back to something in here. And then it can be something where when you all make the decision, there is a justifiable reason as to why it falls into those categories. There's not a lot of wiggle room because the bill was so specific in terms of where these funds can go, right? And so this is just where they are. And so my advice to the applicants was to do their best in their language and their narrative to link it to something to here. So that's the approach that you all want to take, is how well they did that, whether or not it makes sense, where it falls. And if it's something that you all approve, that you can say why, right? And then that throughout the analysis of the applications that we're consistent in those decisions. So does that make sense? It's not a yes or no, like we can't decide just because of the way this is written. We can't decide, yes, we are funding this. We have to decide whether or not what they're asking for fits into these particular requirements. So that's kind of the approach, Dan.
Yeah, that's making sense, Rachel. I'm just thinking from like a jail's perspective applying that could feel very risky to like say, well, what we really need is an EHR and we're going to ask for that. But then if it feels like a risky item to kind of ask for and as a body, we're not sure until we see the application. I guess I just feel like there's potential kind of risk involved there.
Yeah.
But,
and I will say that is true for every budget request, right? In a grant program, when you ask for things, this is a little bit different because it's formula, so they'll be giving funds, but in terms of what they're asking for, if it's an unallowable, it's going to automatically disqualify. If it's something that doesn't fit into kind of how this grant is supposed to proceed or function, then it's something that may or may not be funded. So there's always kind of that risk in a budget ask within grant programs. It's just kind of the nature of how grants function. But I did stress, be clear in your narrative, and make sure that you're succinct and that you're linking it back to something that's in these requirements. So so does everybody kind of understand between these two slides the feedback part? So if there's something, so again, we're not really analyzing the quality or how well these programs are going to function in the future, because we don't know. We are looking to see whether or not they meet these requirements through the analysis, through the narrative. And then also these funding asks and whether or not they're making connections to these requirements as well. So any questions on this? This is kind of the heart of the analysis, both from staff and you all on the 24th. Also, is there something that you all feel is missing that we could potentially, I know that these are in OAR and they're also in the bill, and so it's kind of straightforward, but potentially anything else. The way that this is going to work, I think Ryan asked this earlier, is that they come in on the 13th. I think the 14th is that Monday. If you all give me a day to get everything together, we would then send out a Google Drive, probably that Tuesday, so the 15th of October, with the budget projection sheets and the applications to all of you. So you will get them beforehand to review, and you'll have them on, when the meeting on the 24th starts as well. And so you'll get them as soon as we are able to download them, put them together, and kind of put them in a place where you all can access them and read them on your own time. So that's the plan, unless you all don't want them that early. Moxie.
Yes, thanks. My concern is only related to the first bullet point about providing any other reasonable treatment to people in custody with OUD. One of the challenges in our field is that if you offer abstinence-based programs to people who use opioids, it can actually worsen their overdose risk. So I just want to bring that up before any individual applications come in. Just that with the best of intentions, research shows that if you offer abstinence counseling in groups without any medication, that person is highly likely to abstain for a short period, lose their opioid tolerance, resume drug use whenever they have access, and then they're at more risk of overdosing and dying. So in some cases, doing nothing is much better for the patient than doing the wrong thing. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, and Moxie, that's a great example of potentially giving feedback to a grantee, right? Or an applicant, and making sure that they understand that and they can adjust accordingly as their program kind of gets off the ground or goes through the process of this grant. So that's a perfect example. If you do catch that, or if you do see that on any of the applications, we can absolutely provide that kind of feedback for sure. Dan?
Thanks. I was just going to mention, I'm foreseeing, someone might say, I want to add, I have a MAT or MOED program. I might want to add some behavioral treatment to that. So we may see things that are kind of like adjunct additions to medication. My opinion is that's probably reasonable if a jail already has their MOED program going well. But just kind of a parallel thought to Moxie about these uses that aren't directly for the medication and delivery of the medication, but are still kind of helpful. Or like hiring a certified recovery peer that's going to help with transitions for the program, things like that.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments or questions on these two slides? Okay. So the next two slides, we're getting near the end. I just kind of put together two slides just as an example of something that I can present to you all with information on the 24th. And so I kind of just want your all's feedback. I just put this together just kind of based on what I think you all might want to see. If I'm missing something, or if there's something that I need to add, this is time for feedback. And so this would be the criteria met, which was this slide right here, back here, would be this table. So then I would indicate that they met, what criteria they met or didn't meet. And then based on that, then we could then provide feedback to the applicants, a proposal overview kind of what their program is. I did program type. I didn't know if planning or existing was appropriate. So that might be a place where I need feedback. If it's implementation or existing, I don't know if that's a better word to use. The service area is really just kind of what correctional facility, where the jurisdiction is, total funding request, and then a funding recommendation if there is anything that was disqualified. So, and then I also have, I'll show you this as well, another slide where then we kind of get into the funding tables and kind of what they requested, and a high kind of level overview of the requested items, which within each category. So I have these two slides as a way to kind of present these applicants. What am I missing? Grant.
So I just wanted to kind of confirm a couple of things. One, so like the grant review committee is, I mean, they're the ones that are determining whether this criteria was actually met, right? And CJC essentially says, we believe the criteria was met because of this, this, and this, right?
Yes. So staff can do that. Staff can come and say, we believe this was met this way and this way. If there's something that you all want to add or disagree with, that is kind of the time. That's your all's. So we can present it as our analysis of this is where we think, this is how we think they were met. And then you all can come in with, whatever you all want to say or whatever discussion you all want to have. It's kind of just the reason why this is an option is because it just makes it consistent across the board with applicants if it's presented the same way. Because if it wasn't presented this way, then we would have to have that conversation with every applicant. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think my concern, just sitting on having sat on other grant review committees, is just often that can be taken as prescriptive that the criteria has been met rather than,
Yep.
you know, we all here is some level of subject matter experts to kind of analyze that. And so I just, you know, when we're presenting that, I think it's good to sort of remind folks that, you know, we believe the criteria has been met. However, you know, that is what this committee is here for.
Okay. That's great feedback. Do you, is it helpful to have it in this particular structure, or do you want it criteria met? Do you want like staff analysis of criteria met? Do you want some other wording at the top to kind of indicate that you all can change that?
Yeah, I think what would be helpful is just like where the criteria met is just the what in the application, you know, met that criteria, right?
Okay.
So that we can kind of that way we can determine how CJC kind of came to their conclusion that those criteria were met. And if we have a disagreement, we know what particular thing we are disagreeing about.
Perfect. Okay. That is great feedback. Okay, so we will change kind of that table and try to present it in a way where it reflects that rather than and I understand the assumption that it's prescriptive, and so that's not our intention. So I think this will be a little bit more helpful to you all as you go through this. So Dan.
Is it reasonable if us on this committee, if we're reviewing applications, can we reach out to who submitted it and say we had a question about your number 3 about how you said what you're doing aligns with best practices? Is that reasonable to do like prior to our official meeting to approve or disapprove applications?
So that's a great question. So no. And the reason why is because you would then have, so the idea is for you all as a body that makes recommendations, you've got to be consistent across the board. This is a great question. So if you do have a question or something isn't clear or you feel like something isn't complete, you can reach out to us and then we can reach out to the applicant and just say, we're looking for completeness. Can you clarify this? Keep in mind, though, that we can only do that between the 13th and the 24th, right? And so there's got to be kind of that turnaround to get feedback from them so that we can then present. So make sure you just go through staff on that rather than going directly to applicants. And it's just because of you all as a body, because you're making decisions, you want to make sure there's a sense of objectivity across the board. So great question though.
I think I'm hearing a large part of that is making sure we hold the same information essentially. And so it's not like Dan is individually talking to all these jails and then
correct
comes into approval meeting with extra knowledge.
Yeah. Also, you have to realize too, these applicants talk, right? So if you reach out to one, they're going to like, it just makes it much easier if staff reaches out. And then also it doesn't put them kind of, the other thing too is this is also, I'm glad you brought this up during the actual meeting. If there is a question where you know, staff doesn't have the answer and we need to reach out, we will not, the applicants during that meeting cannot talk. We will reach out to them and then get your answer for that same reason. Right. And so we don't want to put them in a position to where they're having to speak directly to you and defend. We've had those situations and they don't end well. And so we just could try to keep it pretty objective and consistent for you all. Okay. So, yep, absolutely. But if you have questions or something doesn't make sense, reach out to me and we can get clarification.
Yeah, that's helpful. I do talk to jails a lot about their programs, so I'll just have to let you know if those conversations in my other roles take us in a direction. Like I run a echo for the jails that we're starting at the end of September. So they may be talking about programs and we'll just talk about it case by case, I guess. Yeah.
And just keep in mind, Dan, as we go through these applications, if you feel like there's a conflict, you can always just give us that information. And if you didn't do it beforehand, but we're going through something and you're like, I don't know if I should comment on this, you can just say, I think I have a conflict right here. I'm not going to participate in this discussion. So that's okay to do in the meeting if it comes up, for sure. Any other feedback on this slide? Do you need, is the planning or existing appropriate? That was kind of the thing that I needed to know. Is implementation a better word for people who are just kind of getting started? or they have an existing program, what is an appropriate word to use there for my purposes? Does anybody have can I pick one? Okay, nobody cares? Okay. I might use implementation then. I feel like that's a little bit better of a reflection of how this grant is going. And so I'll put in implementation. Anything else that you feel is missing on this? Okay, perfect. And then this one as well, like I said, this is going to kind of just be a little bit, here's what they requested. You all will have these in front of you. More importantly, you'll also have the narratives with these budget requests in front of you as well. And so to kind of get to Grant's point, we will go through and do kind of our best as staff, the analysis of, yes, this qualifies. It doesn't mean that you all can't have discussion. Going back to Dan's question in the beginning about the EHR, did I say that right? This would be a time where you all would discuss whether or not it makes sense in terms of their ask and whether or not it fits. The only thing I don't have here is I don't have a link back to this. I can add it, or we can have I can have it in my notes that they met these, that they fell under this criteria. I can add a column here in terms of what criteria it falls under, or that we think it falls under, kind of gets to Grant's point. This is a staff analysis that this request falls under one of these categories. And then can be a discussion, much like the criteria met. If you think that would be helpful to see all on one slide. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. And I assume that list isn't exhaustive, right? There'll be like equipment on there and stuff too, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Yeah. No, and this is whatever so if they don't have a category that they didn't request, it won't be on here. It'll just be the categories that they requested, but I can then add a column to like what funding category it meets or it falls under, that staff thinks, and you all can have those discussions. Okay. Perfect. Okay. That is all I have. I have public comment that I had to do really fast. But are there any questions about anything that we have covered about the 24th? You will get those applications either on the 14th or 15th. Depends on how quickly I can get everything together. And then we will meet back on the 24th. We do need quorum on that, so keep that in mind. So if you have said you will be there, if something changes, please let us know. It is scheduled for 6 hours. Like I said, I have no idea how many applications we're going to get. So it could, I don't know how long it's going to go, but we'll get through these. So any questions on anything that we have gone over today? Okay. All right. I don't think but if there are any members of the public that are in here, this is your time to make a comment. Just keep in mind that we can't ask questions. I don't think there's any members of the public here, but just pause for a second. Okay. That is all I have. If you all have any questions that come up or any issues, please feel free to reach out to me. And like I said, I will see you all on the 24th. You will get the applications a couple days after we get them as well. So awesome. Thank you for spending your Monday morning with me. Awesome. Have a good week.
Thank you.
We'll see you all.
Rachel. You're doing great.
Yep.